Only love can make it rain. Today, we're going to, so far I've been operating under the presumption that we're working on one system, which I've sort of bent in various ways because I've actually put this on two systems in these videos. Three, actually. But so far I've been managing their configurations independently of each other, these three systems. And when I make a change to one, often I have to make a change to the other two because, they're very similar. So rather than have three configurations to manage, what I would like to do is I'd like to factor this configuration out into a single configuration, or at least a single version control repository. There'll be at least three separate configurations in here. Well, probably just two for now. I can do a third in this video. But the idea being that we're going to make it possible to disuse the NixOS, the Etsy NixOS configuration.nix file in favor of a file that is in another place that we can more easily version control. And I'm going to come up with several conventions here. You might consider using the same ones. I think they're okay, not so bad. Here is our current configuration.nix that lives in Etsy NixOS. It is, just one big file. There's also a hardware configuration.nix in here that got created mostly by, I think it actually got created entirely by our hardware scanner at the beginning of when I first installed it on this machine. There's also a couple directories here, an Emacs directory and a P10K directory that are referred to by stuff inside this configuration Nix thing. We copy this, Emacs.d file over, and then we also copy our P10K file over, directory over to, these are home manager managed things. So anyway, what I'd like to do is I'd like to start by creating a directory. This happens to be inside of this project's NixOS config VC directory, but in Nix config. Oops, maker. In reality, I intend to, spoiler alert, I've already actually done this. I already have a Nix config. That's where it's going to wind up being. But for purposes of creating it from scratch, we're going to create another Nix config directory, and I'm going to do it by hand. What I've already done for the factoring of our configuration file in a new directory, in a new Nix config directory, just to make it obvious what's happening here. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to think about, okay, what do we need? How are we going to structure this thing? And what affordance are we going to use to make it possible to configure, use common configuration to configure parts of two different systems, but be able to specialize when as necessary. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to use, I've heard it said, and I've seen it done, that you can use a NixOS flake for such thing. There are a number of other options. I'm going to start simple because my limited understanding of the utility of a NixOS flake, and I probably have this entirely wrong, is that it might be best described by an analogy, which is if you're used to Docker, that a configuration.nix file like we have inside of NixOS here is sort of like a Docker file. It even with home manager involved, it has one configuration, has one set of stuff that gets installed on a machine somewhere. And a flake is more like Docker Compose, where you can have a description of a number of configurations of different kinds of machines. In this case, I don't care too much about having. I'm not setting up servers. I'm setting up machines that are almost identical to each other. These are both laptops that live in my apartment, and so a flake, I don't have to run. One's not a web server, and the other one's, you know, in a case that you use flake, you might have a web server configuration and a database server configuration like that. That's not the case for these two machines. They're literally almost identical to each other. They're off by one model number, and I use them for the same purpose. So what I'm trying to do is just centralize the management of my, shared configuration between them. So I'm not going to use a flake. I'm going to use a flag to NixOS rebuild, which is kind of hard to find here. It's this -I flag, and I found it. I think I saw another YouTuber, Will. He has a video about doing something like this, although he only sets up one configuration inside of it, or one machine inside of his. And he turned me on to the fact that you can point NixOS rebuild at an alternate location if you pass a -I and then this NixOS config equals thing, and then a path, to a configuration.nix or whatever. That's not a path we're going to use, but that's the concept anyway. And instead of using etc NixOS configuration.nix, it'll just use that file, and then we'll version control the stuff that is in that directory. So that's the plan. So the first thing I'm going to do in order to get that done is I am going to think about what my directory structure should be. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a common directory inside here. And the common directory is going to hold things that are both dot files for home manager, for Emacs and our Z shell stuff. And it's going to contain Nix files, Nix expression files, for configuration that is common between all the machines I have. So the easiest way to do that is to sort of copy from our existing place, which is etc NixOS, and then we have Emacs. Etc NixOS Emacs. Copy -R. Actually, I'm gonna cd. Z shell doesn't like a interactive. I gotta fix that. Anyway, I'm gonna copy our etc NixOS Emacs to here. I'm gonna copy that our P10K to here. Those are dot files that are going to be managed by Home Manager. They're already managed by Home Manager. We're just going to switch things around so they're available to multiple systems in version control. And then the other thing that we need to do is I think we're going to copy etc NixOS configuration.nix here. And that'll start to give us a place to this file we will steal from, and we'll move some of the configuration that's in it into both other files in this common directory and files that are local to individual systems. So let's see here. So let's go to This machine is called ThinkNix 512, I think. Is that what it's called? Yes. And for purposes of ease of thought, although this decision probably needs to be revisited at some point, I'm going to copy the hardware configuration for this machine into ThinkNix 512 instead of into Common, for what I hope are obvious reasons. Our hardware is slightly different from each other, so this hardware configuration has stuff about the disk drive and the initRD modules that may not be the same between machines. So this is a good place to start. So we have what do we have? We have, oh, that's too much information. We have a common directory that has configuration.nix, which is our current copy of our current etc NixOS configuration.nix on this machine. We're going to steal from that, and then we've moved our hardware configuration, our current etc NixOS hardware configuration.nix, into this machine-specific directory. And the first thing I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to well, there's one thing I know I need to do inside of here. Let's projects NixOS config vc, yeah. Nixconfig. One thing I know I need to do in here, I happen to know that I've labeled these disks the same on all my machines. So this vfat drive is actually also available. It's not just available, well, what I just deleted from here was by UUID. So I know the drive that is in AL dev disk by UUID 8 something. We can see that that's that, but I also happen to know that that's available by label, and it's called Nix boot, and we can see that it's the same device. So it's just I can not worry about copying this file around to other machines if I stick with this convention. And I can just use the same hardware configuration, or at least something similar. You know, again, this is why it probably needs to be revisited, because it's not entirely factored down to the T. It's not fifth normal form of factor. we're just trying to get it going here. So by label, and we'll call this Nix boot. That'll have the same effect. And I think everything else is just fine in here. Now, let's get rid of this comment, because we are changing things in there. We don't care. We are tearing the tags off the mattress, man. So that is literally, I think, what our hardware configuration will wind up being for this machine. Let us now think about how we're going to factor our common, quote unquote common configuration being. This is probably going to be too much factoring, maybe a little bit too much factoring. But I think what I want to do is, I think I want to create another file named optimus.nix in here, which is going to be used for machines that have this NVIDIA Optimus graphic. Now, all the machines I happen to currently want to manage with this software do have this Optimus graphic. So it's kind of a little ambitious to factor it out, but that's okay. At least we can see how we import things between files by doing this. So let's make an optimus.nix in here. Nix And inside of optimus.nix, what we want to do is we want to take the stuff. Oops, can't do that. I'm just going to comment in there. We are going to factor out the X server stuff and the NVIDIA hardware stuff from here. So we're going to say NVIDIA, look for NVIDIA stuff. Now, even though this is an NVIDIA specific thing in here, it doesn't hurt if it gets written on machines that don't support NVIDIA stuff. So I'm going to leave it in the very, very common, sort of this configuration.nix in common. And it'll be written on machines that don't have this Optimus graphics, but that's okay. We don't really care. That's not important. It's just a shell script. So what we are going to move is we're going to move everything that we know about the video drivers and the hardware here. As a matter of fact, I'm going to cut this. I think I'm going to cut this. Yeah, I'm going to cut this. And I could move this over to the hardware thing, but I think I'm going to leave it there. Some of our config will likely. I am not a political person, so I don't care what requires it. Something is bound to. So, and inside of here, now again, I am not a expert in the Nix language, but as I understand it, the general gist of things here is that we need to have a line like this that looks a lot like this, you know, in these curly brackets plus colon up the top of all of our files, and then inside under that, you need to open a curly brace, close a curly brace without a trailing semicolon down here, and that will likely do the needful. That'll do what we want. We have some options here, and you know, it's likely that we're going to want two different machines to have two different options, or to be able to use one to use offload mode, one to use sync modes, because some machines I have really want sync mode because they're hooked up to an external monitor. Other machines are not, and it's more profitable to use them in offload mode because it's better on battery life. So we'll figure out how to do that later, but for now I'm going to leave this default at offload. This is information about our NixOS. We are going to still be using this channel, this NixOS hardware channel here, that sets up other OpenGL stuff. So this comment still applies here, and we're going to just keep this the same. Hardware Bluetooth enable. Well, that's not right. Okay. I'm just going to move that over to configuration.nix, I suppose. Hardware. Sure, why not? So do we have anything in here? Offload enable. Okay. I don't think we need any extra arguments up here. Sometimes we'll need some extra arguments in this leading line so that directives down below know what we're talking about. In here, I think okay. And let's see here. So we factored out our Optimus stuff. We took it out of the configuration.nix file. What else do we need to factor out of here? Well, we don't have our hardware configuration isn't in this directory, isn't in a common directory. It's actually over in the, I think, Nix 512 directory. We don't know for sure that this is a Lenovo ThinkPad at this place in this location. And same with these other two things. So I think the only thing we can leave in here is the idea that we know we're going to use Home Manager in here. And the stuff that we just took out, I think actually belongs over here somewhere. Let's put in a hardware configuration for now. Yeah, I think that's sort of makes sense. Sort of makes sense. So we're going back to common now. So the only imports we're making here for Home Manager. And let's see. Okay, so this is a directive, an option that is not going to be common for every machine. This networking host ID thing. We're going to take that. We're going to move it, and we're going to actually put it. It's not a hardware option really. It's more of a configuration option. So let's make a new file in here. .nix. I'm going to do this for now. Open that. Network host ID with that. And inside of here, what do we need to put in there? That. Inside of our Nix 512 thing. Okay. And what else? Do we need to prefix this with anything special here? Don't think so. Okay. So everything else in here looks okay. We're going to use grub. We know we're going to use grub. I'm going to presume that all the devices I set up with this thing have an EFI partition and are configured via the EFI. I'm not going to mess with that, with trying to factor that right now. I'm going to always use ZFS on every machine. That is true. That is true. Oh, here's one. Can't use this here. We have to move that over into our per host configuration stuff. Yeah. Thank you for that comment. All right. So those two things I have. And what else is in our common here? Yeah, I'm going to assume all these machines are the same time zone. Sure, why not? X server, I'm going to assume they want an X server. Assume all this stuff is correct. Cups we want pulse audio, Bluetooth. Assume all that's true. Although some of this, we're going to have to move some of this stuff around as we add machines that are less similar to each other. But for now, we're not going to worry about it. User should be the same. I want the same Chris M user on every system. MRC looks good. The set of system packages should be fine. Here's where that NVIDIA offload gets written, even though it might not be on an NVIDIA system, but that's okay. Fonts are fine. Don't want any firewall. We're going to enable TLP. That's fine, even though probably it wouldn't work on desktops. But I'm not going to worry about it right now. Sure, Steam. Why not? Then we have Home Manager. That's fine from Chris M. And we have our SSH configuration. Then we have our KDE SSH agent configuration here that we did in another video. Our Emacs stuff, and we have our Emacs directory in here. So this file path should be correct. It's still that. It's going to copy that stuff over. We want Git. indeed. Same thing with p10k. We have our p10k directory in that. That should be fine. Oops. Configuration.nix. Yes, and we want Z shell and all that stuff, and we want shell aliases. So these are likely to change. These we do need to change because we are no longer going to be using the configuration stuff that is inside of Etsy NixOS. So let's see here. We need to change this to I NixOS config equal home slash, and we're going to pretend that I have this. I'll make a symlink, I suppose. Next config switch. Next config. And then in order to not have to define these shell aliases in every machine's configuration, in order to have a common configuration, I'm going to presume that a configuration.nix lives inside this next config directory, and we will make a symlink on each machine from nixconfig configuration.nix to nixconfig / system name / configuration.nix. So that is the framework we're building here. Fun fact, this home here, these are shell aliases, and I think that this is probably technically wrong to put this /home here, because I think this only gets evaluated once when the shell is created. When each shell is created, it's not evaluated on every lookup of the alias. But since it's always going to be the same for every given user, it should be fine, and it's always going to be, you know, what tilde refers to now for whatever user. It's always going to be Chris M in this case anyway. So, but it could be confusing to somebody later if you have multiple users and you're trying to use these same aliases. Excuse me. So we're going to just change our edit thing here. We're not going to have it edit the global one. We're going to have it edit the one they're putting there. We're going to copy this over the same way for for upnix, which is our upgrade. This is the same as just passes -- upgrade along. Search nix, we don't need to change. We do need to change NixOS rebuild, or rbnix rather. I'm sure there's a way I could alias this in a variable, but I'm not going to do that right now. I'm on a roll, man. And nothing else. Should be fine. Okay. Doesn't need to be out there. Okay, and the rest of this stuff is Z shell stuff, which shouldn't need to change. Okay. I think that's right. So, what else do we need to do? Well, what do we have? We have a common directory with configuration.nix and then a optimus.nix. This is a little bit eager at this point, but that's okay. Optimus.nix. Do we need to import anything in optimus.nix? No, we do not. And inside of here, this is still in common, so no, we don't need to import anything in there. But inside of here, if we're going to continue to put it in this hardware file, let's see if we need to put this in here. Yeah, we need to say --common and optimus.nix. That's how we refer to that file. saying that this Nix 512 has an Optimus card in it, just like it has in Intel CPU in it. So, so anything else? We have to change our configuration.nix file inside of here. Let's see. I think we do. Since this will be the sort of jumping off point for everything else, this is the file that we're going to symlink as home.nixOS/configuration. We have to import our other files here for all their stuff to get done. So the two files we have to import are in here are our local, our specific hardware configuration. .nix. That one. And we have to import our common configuration.nix. That, oh, no, I gotta end this, end that thing. And that may be, that may be all we need to do. Yeah, these things have, I think, I'm not entirely sure, but I think the way that Nix decides what to pass in here, I don't know what the ellipsis means yet. And I'm not sure about this. Don't take my word for it, but I think if you just name things that it wants to pass in anyway, like this module's path, that it'll pass it in. I think it's opportunistically passing in things that you name there. So don't take my word for it. I'm totally guessing. So I think that's good. I think we might have a Nix configuration that we can try to use here. Let's link our ThinkNix 512 configuration.nix here. Oops. The hell? Did I copy it or something by making the mistake? Cat ThinkNix 512 configuration.nix. Oh, I hard linked it. Let's see. Hard linked it. I want to symbolic link it. Okay. So now that I've done that, if I've done everything properly, I should be able to go into Etsy NixOS and just to show there's nothing behind our back, not to, this is probably a good idea to do on every system that you do this with, is to rename configuration.nix to something, aside, just so that NixOS rebuild can't find it if we type our command wrong, because it'll just rebuild the wrong configuration here. So the first time that we do this on this machine anyway, remember that this wouldn't work on a new machine that we brought up, because it wants the common configuration, the common configuration plus the Optimus configuration, not the Optimus configuration, hardware configuration, wants some channels to be added before it can do its job. You would see the error if it didn't work. It wouldn't do anything bad, but we happen to have those channels already added, because we don't have to add any new ones. We just move this stuff around, so there's no reason to add any new ones in here. That's fine. But if we were to try to do this on a new system and those channels hadn't been added yet, we'd need to add them first, and we'd also probably need to add a user too in a vanilla system. So we don't need to do that here. Yeah. So I've already, of course, done this before, so I already have an actual Nix config that I've actually checked into a repository here, but I'm going to move that aside for now. It should have this roughly the same contents as what I just did, but we're just going to make sure that this video, the steps outlined in the video, not just the intent work. So I'm going to move this one that I know works aside. Okay. And then I'm going to, for fun here, link, well, not exactly for fun, but just so this works the way it would work if I had put this thing in here originally, which is my intended location for it. I would projects, NixOS, config vc, nix config here. And so if I cd in nix config, we have configuration.nix in here that is pointing at our thing nix512, configuration.nix file. That includes our hardware configuration. Which includes a bunch of stuff from NixOS hardware plus our Optimus stuff. And it also includes our common configuration, our like sort of global software configuration and stuff. And all of our paths here should be right. We're pointing at home nix config, blah 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 blah. And did we make sure that we moved our Etsy NixOS configuration? Yeah, oh no, we didn't. NixOS. Sudo move configuration.nix aside. Just to make sure. Make sure if we type it wrong, we're not using the wrong configuration file. So now we don't have a configuration nix in there. Okay, so the first time we do this, the shell aliases that we set up to do swinix and all that stuff, although in our configuration file we changed them, we haven't activated the configuration that would make those shell aliases active. So we have to do it by hand at least once. So we have to go back here. We type sudo NixOS rebuild. Let's copy it from what the thing actually says. So let's rebuild, and I'm going to call NixOS boot because I don't really want to. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do first is this is a useful tool. You can use dry activate. That'll test our configuration, see if we have any syntax errors or things that don't make any sense. And then let's see if that works. So we're not pointing at Etsy nix configuration.nix. We're pointing at home nix config configuration.nix now. And we shouldn't see many changes. It should come up with roughly the same configuration. Yeah. So I don't know exactly what these changes are. I'm not too worried about it. Looks like home manager stuff. Not entirely sure, but that's okay. I'm sure there's probably a way to see what those derivations mean and what the changes are, but I don't know it, so I'm not going to concern myself with it yet. But since it worked, let's do switch. Yeah, yeah. Now, alias, before we switch, oh hell. Did it already switch? Or maybe this shell had old aliases around. But it's the aliases before, the aliases now are the new aliases. So now let's see. If we, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to now run, let's see, like boot Nix, whatever, something like that, which should run the same command that we just, well, I ran switch before, but it actually shouldn't do anything. Yeah, it's not gonna do anything. That's fine. So, but I do have a new generation that I built that should be accessible from Grub. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the recorder and I'm going to reboot, and we'll see if, you know, Emacs still works and I still have the same configuration, and, you know, OBS still works and all that. So sure enough, I rebooted. Still has that sort of custom configuration there. CD to Nix config. Does Emacs work? Indeed, we know Z shell works. We're in good shape, man. I think basically there's no change from what we did before. It's just that we now have our configuration in a place where it can be version controlled, and it is factored in a way that we can add a new system with a different name to it with slightly different configuration values, and use this symlink, this configuration.nix symlink on the other machine, not to point at think Nix 512, but to point at its configuration. Given that this is very similar to given that this is very similar to the configuration that I already have checked into Git, which will be linked in the description, I'm going to switch this back over to the pre-chewed one that I had before, not this sort of bespoke one that I just made, because it already has configuration for another system that I have laying around, and I'll show you what that looks like. So I'm going to say make dir, I'm going to say move Nix config to temp, and my old Nix config, which actually is checked into version control, make that Nix config, and it's effectively exactly the same as what I just did. Yeah, slightly more stuff in it. It's got a README in there. It's checked into Git repository. The git ignore in here ignores configuration git at the root because it's symlink, and it ignores a file called result, which sometimes happens if you do Nix. If you do something like boot, I guess, or it could be NixOS rebuild boot. But actually, this is a good thing to test. NixOS, since we got rid of that etc Nix configuration file, what happens if we just run NixOS rebuild dry activate to test it out without passing our -i flag? Yep, it can't do shit without that -i flag. So that's really good. It is, you know, you have to pass a -i flag at this point. Fantastic. Fantastic. So we have this, we just made our ThinkNix 512 thing. I have another system here called ThinkNix 52, which is slightly different, and it is in the same spirit as our ThinkNix 512. It has slightly different configuration. It wanted to add another module here, so there's another thing called AHCI for this P52 that it put in there. Everything in here, other than that, is, I think, the same. Yeah, pretty much the same. Yep, nothing else. Exactly the same as P51, just needed that module. The configuration Nix is slightly different because we're importing the same stuff. All this stuff's exactly the same for this P52. we have one other, we have one difference. We want to use, on that machine, I have an external monitor hooked up to it, and I want to use sync mode and not enable mode. So I tried to say this before, and it comes up when it tries to switch to this configuration. It says, hey, there's a configuration conflict between this and what's inside of your hardware configuration file, because the hardware configuration file has sorry, your Optimus.configuration file, common. It has offload enable true in there. So it throws up its hands. It says, I don't know what to do, but you can tell it, hey, just please ignore the value that you found in the other file and prefer this one by using this lib.makeForce thing. I'm sure there's probably other ways to do this. There's probably all kinds of inheritance and overriding and everything, but I don't know how to do that yet. But that's the simple way to do just very simple differences between stuff. We have to turn offload enable off on the other one. It's already on. It's true in the other one, and then we have to turn sync enable on here. It has to be one or the other. It can't be neither. And then host ID for this one is different, and the host name is different, and that's it. And then I have this stuff checked into Git. Oops, did not say that. Status, yeah. So Git conf. As a matter of fact, I'll just go there in web browser. It's easier. Yeah, man. Here it is. And I wrote some docs for myself about how to add a new system to the stuff. Of course, I didn't show you how to log into the other machine, but I'll show you the other machine real quick. It is checked out. Our same thing here is checked out in the same place, and its configuration Nix. Oops, that's actually wrong. Git pull SSH agent setup here. I have to link into from Nix 52 configuration.nix here, like that. And then I've already run NixOS rebuild switch on here, so it knows about all that stuff. It's already done. So if I run yeah, I'll just run this. Well, I'll run it by hand here. I'll just do a dry activate in case I've made some horrible mistake here. But it really can't. It's hard to mess things up. You really should. Really shouldn't be afraid of it, because I can always roll back to an older version. Let's see. Shouldn't actually do anything because I didn't change anything. Yep, that's already activated. So now I have two systems that share some bits of configuration, have some differences in configuration, and all the files are use version control. That's how you do that. All right, thanks for watching.